Welcome to the K-State Regen Ag Pod, where we talk all things regenerative agriculture here at Kansas State University, across the state of Kansas, and beyond. I'm Nick Detter, your host, and today I'm joined by Chad and Jennifer Simmelink, two proud K-State alums that are leaders in implementing regenerative ag practices on their family farm in western Jewell County. Jennifer is also the executive director of the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, a nonprofit whose goal is to educate and connect farmers across the state around the topic of soil health. Chad, Jennifer, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I think just to start, would you guys mind introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your operation, your background, how you guys became interested in working on this topic of regenerative agriculture and soil health?
We're a farm in western Jewell County. We do a bred heifer program for our cattle operation, and our cropping side is the typical corn, soybeans, and wheat, and we've implemented cover crops, and we do other forages for the livestock. I can't say like a point where we became interested in the regenerative farming. It's just kind of been a cycle over the years. Started no-tilling in 2003. Everything's been full no-till since then. In 2007, we started dabbling with cover crops, kind of after listening to some speakers at some conferences, and just kind of happenstance on some grazing some milo stocks, and we kind of shifted from there to some cover crops, and things have just kind of been going since then.
Yeah, that's great. So what are some of the challenges? You've been doing these practices a long time, so I think you guys have a pretty unique perspective on kind of the whole journey, from implementation to seeing the benefits and then continuing to press on even as you get farther into these practices. But what are some of the challenges that you've seen and you've had to overcome as you've implemented no-till and implemented those cover crops?
Initially, it's just a big change. Going to the conferences, they said sell all your tillage equipment. We didn't do that right away, but pretty quick we sold our tillage equipment, so we were invested in, in 03, 04. We'd been dabbling with no-till since 98, 99, so we had a feel for what it would be like. So felt good in that transition, really felt that was going to be a solid choice. I farmed with my father at the time, up until 2 years ago, and so some of the challenges are different thoughts or perspectives of what should happen on the farm. So those are some of the challenges, especially with the cover crops. When I started that, he wasn't sure about it, but after we saw how it worked well with the cattle, he became 100% on the cover crops.
So if those are some of the challenges, what are some of the benefits you've seen from adopting those practices?
Well, with the cattle, the cover crops have really worked well. Gives us, I don't like pulling a feed wagon, so the cover crops really gives us another avenue to feed the livestock. Gives us a way to be around the cattle more. We strip graze the cover crops, so anywhere from 1 to 3 days we're out there putting up a new strip, and it really lets the cattle be around a human being for more of their life, and they get used to being around a human being. When we sell the cattle, their docility is a big part of our program, and just having a human out there, human interaction with them, really helps with their disposition.
And I'll add in on this. So I guess you'd say joined the farm in 2004 when we got married, and some of the initial things I remember Chad talking about, you had a lot of kind of erosion goals in mind. So as we've done this transition, have you seen some of the benefits from the erosion control and the infiltration piece?
So that was our main goal for the no-till was erosion. We were conventional till. Dad was very a big supporter of terraces. I mean, he rebuilt terraces all the time on our farm, made sure they were in good working order, but it still isn't enough to really take the erosion down. I mean, our goal would be zero erosion, and even to this day, we're still not there, but we just keep working towards that goal. So that was the main reason we went to no-till, was for the erosion control and the water savings. There's other benefits that came along with it. As we expanded a little bit, the labor aspect is nice. We could cover more acres with less help. Just in this, what we saw in an increase of yield, I didn't expect. It changed our rotations. We used to be a wheat, milo, fallow, and we've cut out fallow, raising corn and soybeans in our area that we never thought really possible. And it's not just us. I mean, our area is a large percentage no-till, and it just really works in that central Kansas region for us for the yield increase as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're in that wheat, corn, soybean rotation. Where do the cover crops normally fit within the rotation for you guys?
Most of our cover crops are after the wheat stubble. It's just that's the fallow period that we have that it's easy to implement the cover crops. It gives us the most growth for biomass to graze it with the livestock and still leave enough cover because we were shooting for 100% ground cover. So that's where it fits the best. We do some cover crops in other areas. We do some full season covers where we won't even plant a grain crop on a field. It'll just be a forage that will get grazed either during that summer or in the wintertime.
And are you normally doing mixes or single species, or what have you guys found works best for you in that area?
We do mainly mixes anymore. I like what the mixes do for our soil. You can really see the changes if we get up to at least a 5-way mix. We have a lot of platy structure in our soils in our part of Kansas. Just a year of that mix of cover crop change, you can see it change that structure. Now, once we go back to our cash crops, that platy structure can come back, but then we come back in with that mix again after 3 years and can really bring that structure back to what we want again.
Yeah. And then my last question just on some of these practices is, you mentioned you saw some yield benefit. So overall, would you say it's been a net positive on yield and profitability? I don't know if you've thought about that side of it as well.
Yes, it's a complex system, so I can't nail down like the profitability. Yes, the cover crops generated this X number of dollars benefit to our operation, but over the whole rotation, like if you drew a box around our whole rotation to figure out the system, and it is a net gain, but I can't. It's hard to you can't nail down like, oh, this did the X number of dollars to this part of the operation. Because sometimes we can see a little bit of a drag in like a corn after the cover crop, but then we see a bump in the soybean yield after that corn, or our wheat yields even 2 years later. So through the whole system, yes, we are seeing a benefit, but I can't just draw a box around the corn crop and say, hey, cover crops gave us X dollars profit to this corn.
Yeah. Well, my next question is, so those are kind of your established practices. Are there any practices you're currently experimenting with or that you hope to incorporate in your operation going forward, or even just modifications you've had to make over time, either with your cover cropping or your no-tilling? I know one of the concerns, you're not in way far western Kansas, but a lot of no-tillers out there for sure have problems with herbicide-resistant weeds. What are some of the ways you either want to try new things or you've had to be adaptive with those practices over time?
Yeah, things we've adapted with over time and other, practices we've dabbled in. We've tried a perennial rotation in our crop ground. We really like that. So we would do 4 years of a perennial on a crop field and then do 4 years of a grain crop. We've pulled back of that just because of the amount of cattle we had to buy to go along with our regular program that they run on native range in the summer. So we were buying extra cattle to run on these perennials through the summer, and then some labor issues. We had to pull back from that. Really liked what that did for our soil. That's probably took it even farther than anything we can do with cover crops. So we look at dabbling back into that, bringing that back into our operation, really looking at the nutrient balance. What can we do to balance our nutrients so we can pull back on some of these that maybe we're over-applying and bring in the ones that we're missing? I just think there's something there, especially with the cover crops. There's something about the nutrients that I might take the rest of my career to nail down, but there's something there. I just haven't put my finger on it, on nutrient balance with the cover crops. It changes our system, and we have to manage it a little different.
Have you seen, like, as you've done soil testing over the years, changes in your soil organic carbon or your malic P or your total nitrogen? Has there been any correlation on the impact of those practices on some of those soil test results?
We're not research-based enough on our farm, and also we don't have a baseline, really. Over 95% of our wheat stubble has been on cover crops, had a cover crop planting after harvest since 2008. So I can't say if this change is because of this practice, like if it would have just been no cover crops or even conventionally tilled. I can't say that. Yes, our organic matter is going up. We struggle a little bit I mean, we can be wet and we can be dry in our part of Kansas, and those, even the organic matter tests can move based on the moisture. And we're trying to test routinely, but it can't be based on pure soil moisture profile when we have time to go do it.
Yeah.
Because we were doing soil tests, geo-referenced, GPS referenced, same spot every year, and those tests seemed to move more than we predicted, and I think it was mainly soil moisture.
You mentioned time there, and another thing I've heard you say a few times is labor, and I think that's something that comes up pretty regularly when I'm in conversations with growers about implementing these practices, is just the increase in labor. And it's interesting, you mentioned with no-till, maybe you saw a little bit of a decrease in labor, but definitely cover crops, probably an increase in labor. So could you just talk a little bit about how these changes in practices have impacted that side of your operation and labor and the story around that for you guys?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit on it there. Like you do one thing and you save a little bit on labor, but then we want to implement something new that creates a labor need, and which is all good. If we can take that labor and put it to something more profitable, that's a good thing. But yeah, that's something we try to balance, and that's probably another thing we're going to look at when you say trying to incorporate into our operations future. We need to start looking at every acre a little closer, and so that's where we're going to start doing more of the tissue testing and this nutrient balance, is to really hone in on every acre versus broad scale, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, more like a precision ag approach.
Yes,
almost.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about your operation, and I think there'll probably be a lot of farmers out there that find what you said relatable. Hopefully it encourages somebody else to try some new things, or maybe ask some more questions. But so in that kind of same vein, though, shifting gears to you, Jennifer, we've heard from Chad on what you guys have done on your operation. But what's cool about the Kansas Soil Health Alliance is you're taking those things that you probably get to see at home every day, and as you talk with your husband, and you get to kind of be a part of the effort to spread this information and this knowledge to producers across the state of Kansas. So could you tell us a little bit about the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, what work you guys do, and what some of your goals are, who you're serving?
Absolutely. I'll go back, though, to me getting to spread this across the state. That might work in a kind of negative way for Chad, because I see a lot of other innovative producers and come home and ask questions and add to his list of things that the labor pool's short of supply to try and do. So that, I think, has been a piece of my role that we didn't see coming, and so that's kind of fun, though, to get to have those conversations that we wouldn't have had otherwise. But as far as the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, so as you mentioned, we're a farmer and rancher-led nonprofit, and our mission is to improve and protect Kansas soil through farmer and rancher education and resources. A little bit more about us. We're a relatively new organization, not quite 5 years since we've been out and about. There's myself, one other part-time staff member, an advisor, and then 8 volunteer board members. Every single one of us are farmers and ranchers, so everything that we're out promoting and showing is very much from the grower's perspective. And so we understand, like I said, that perspective of growers and that need for the profitability and to make things as best as possible for the next generation. So we cover all corners of the state. As I said, our board is made up of volunteers from across the state, all different operations and all corners of the state, so we're able to represent and understand that diversity that ag in Kansas has. We work with farmers at all stages of soil health. So, Chad and myself are examples of someone that are 20 plus years in, but we like to reach out to those that are on that leading edge, and then those who are just starting to think about making a change and trying to find the resources that will fill the gaps in knowledge to help them be able to feel comfortable taking on the risk that inherently comes with change.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned that there's people all along different points of the spectrum, and they probably all have different perspectives and different questions. So what are some of those questions you get from somebody that's maybe just starting out versus somebody that's been in it for a long time? Like what are some of those differences, and what interests them, what hurdles they're coming through, what kind of conversations there are? Could you talk at all about how you see the contrast and the different people in the different stages of their journey with these regenerative practices?
Sure. A real common piece is, ties into, No-till's a little simpler. They understand, the equipment that goes into making that transition. Cover crops take a lot more management. If you hear Chad or dove in with anyone who's been through it, there's a lot of iterations to get a blend that suits your goals and your operation. And then each year that may change depending on weather conditions and the different soils and what, grows and expresses the best. So a lot of questions around the cover crop implementation when we start talking about adding in livestock. Lots of questions about, the practical side, the fencing, the watering, does it take that much time to put up a strip, and how do we adjust for that? And so, a lot of what we do to try to fill those needs is, we host a lot of field days and events around the state, sometimes ones that we generate ideas on our own where we've seen there's, an area that hasn't been served. But a lot of times we have farmers or ranchers reaching out to us, excited about something they're seeing and willing to bring other people to their operations. So we're able to share and provide those connections. That's a lot of what we seek to do is, can we put people in a room together where those who have questions can be right there with someone who's, 2-3 years ahead of them. Another piece we've done to break down that hurdle is over the last year, we've started a coaching program across the state. So we have 12 coaches and are establishing a relationship between them and students where they can get that one-on-one learning and conversation. There's so many good resources out there, but once you're going to make a change, sometimes when you find too much information, it's really easy to back down and not feel comfortable with that. So we're putting producers one-on-one where those questions can be asked and answered in that manner where they understand the context of each other's farms. So that's been an exciting project that we've been taking on too.
And I think you're so right about when there's just too much information, it can almost be this information overload and it just scares people into doing nothing. So I think that kind of leads to my next question is, how, an institution like K-State, we've built up a lot of trust, hopefully, with farmers over our, I don't know how many years now of being a land grant, the first land grant, that's something they always like to say. But what's something you think that K-State could do better at helping get this information out to farmers? As you talk to people, what are some of the big questions, or what they're when they're looking at K-State, what their perception of how K-State thinks about these issues? I'm just curious in your work, as you work with all these different farmers, how they feel like K-State maybe fits into this picture.
I'd say K-State is at, the advantage. It's a research institution, so you can do multi-year, replicated trial research that, a farmer's not able to do independently, on their operation. Just again, back to labor or the knowledge to do that. So, continuing that work, the addition of the Regen Ag Farm, and I think the research that's going to come out of that is going to be great. And, I would say, keeping ahead of that and connecting a lot with those farmers who are on the leading edge, so, whether, Chad would be an example of that, and others who are in your Kansas Soil Health Network, what are they looking at and staying with that? Because, we do have farmers in our network that, time is of the essence, and they will go and experiment with something and see how that works, and then they'll share that knowledge, and that's great. But, if K-State's able to push and push those boundaries as well and find that and be able to share it wider. We like to think our network, it is growing quite a bit, but we know K-State is in. Is it every county that we have research and extension? So can be able to put that out there as well and continuing on that. And I think some of the work, too, that's being done, we're seeing a lot of public-private partnerships growing and being able to bring, again, some of those leading edge and those newly transitioning farmers to work together with those private companies on, here's what would help put those connections in place where we see this as, we talk about a systems approach to farming, but it's a systems approach to our food system as well. Absolutely. How do we connect not just the consumer, the grower, the producer, the food company, and the consumer all together? And I bet there would be some pretty good suggestions through those groups as well.
I completely agree. You mentioned our Kansas Soil Health Network, which is a similar name to you guys, but slightly different. It's more of a research focus. And in our previous episode, I think our listeners have heard about that. But two of those farmers that are a part of that are Doug Palin and Justin Knopf, and they haven't been able to come on the show yet. But I understand, Chad, that you're in kind of a cohort with them where you talk about some of your farming ideas and things that you guys are working on. And as Jennifer mentioned, we like to hear from some of our cutting edge farmers. So could you just tell us as you talk with other farmers that are also on the leading edge of this, like what are the conversations you're having with people like Justin and Doug?
Yeah, I mean, the conversations, they vary because there's so many topics out there right now in this space and so many different directions you can go. So yeah, Justin and Doug and Kevin Wiltsey and I are all in a peer group, and just within the four of us, I mean, like Justin and Doug and I would be, some of us have cattle, some of us don't. We're looking at more like I was talking about the nutrients, and like you mentioned, like weed control. How can we use these practices to help with the weeds that are tough to control? Kevin has done a lot of putting perennials, natives, back on his cropland and doing some really cool things there, and that's really exciting what he's done with that. With the technology, drones, a lot of stuff's going on with how we can fine-tune and late season put some nutrients on that we haven't ever thought of, and interseeding with airplanes and drones. On my conservation board, I have two guys they fly on a lot of rye on their corn or on their corn before they harvest it. It's just a wide array of the possibilities that could happen.
Yeah, and I think that's why we like to hear it, is because when you get the people that are kind of on the forefront of it, they're the ones thinking really creatively about it, and it's just exciting because it can spark ideas for other people. So, and I think in that same vein, the last question I just want to ask both of you is what's exciting you in your work, whether it's on the farm or with the Soil Health Alliance. That's the last question I always like to give people, because it just, I think when you see what the people who are really on the ground doing this stuff, what excites them, to me, that's always a good trail to follow of where we should be looking more in as we move forward on these topics.
I guess, it's February. I'm looking forward to green. So spring's coming, and I like to watch things grow, and that's what gets you excited about some of these things. And like I said, I like being out there. I like being out with the crops. I like being out with the cattle. I have an engineering degree, so the technology excites me some. I still like I guess you call it the grassroots, or just feet on the soil, but things that we could do to reduce our chemicals. What can we do with weed control with robots and stuff in the future that we don't have to use the chemicals and things like that. I think how we can integrate the organic part of farming, or the grassroots part of farming with some of the technologies can be exciting.
I guess I'll have a couple, and he kind of hinted to it. The fact that we're putting technology, chemistry, and biology all together and seeing how they can work together to advance these systems. At the heart of it, so much more emphasis in the last few years has been on the biology and understanding its value in the soil and being able to see more of that, but seeing how everything can work together as we make these changes, right? We all have, a goal we'd like to achieve. What can we do in the meantime? What is that first step? And I think all the work seeing that's incorporating these together to help get to, the ultimate goals. But the other piece that excites me that I really like seeing is, I get to go around and meet farmers and ranchers just all over the state and hear their stories and hear their struggles. At times, there's been things that I didn't, realize. My perspective was from one farm. But seeing that, but what's really neat is getting to see kids that are going to be, our second generation to grow up on a farm with a soil health mindset. They didn't see a transition because it happened before they arrived. So the thinking that they're doing and what I think is going to come out of that next generation is going to be, pretty exciting, because they've grown up observing this next level of management that it takes when you're incorporating soil health. That's going to be more natural to them. So then what can unlock after that when they're not spending quite so much thinking on that piece and, where's that next level? And like I said, just these kids that, haven't ever known a farm without cover crops and managed grazing, and haven't spent summers out working ground. That's pretty neat to see that next generation coming up.
Jennifer, if people wanted to know more about the Soil Health Alliance, should they go to your website, or where's the best place to reach you guys?
Absolutely. Most everything we do is housed on our website, kssoilhealth.org. At the very bottom of the website, there's an opportunity to subscribe to a newsletter. We put that out about once a month, and that will keep you as well updated on some of our new favorite resources we found, upcoming events. I'll put a little plug in. This year will be our inaugural Soil Health School that we're calling Digging into the Fundamentals of Soil Health. We're going to keep it a pretty small group of those who are just starting to transition into soil health and make it very hands-on and interactive. That will be in September 16th and 17th outside of Axtell. So our newsletter, our website, and our website will also take you to our social media accounts and YouTube channel. And so you can find about everything there.
Some great resources. Well, Jennifer, Chad, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate the conversation and all the work you guys are doing and being leaders in this space. And everybody, thank you for tuning in to the K-State Regen Ag Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day.